Okay. Welcome, everyone. Always nice to see you guys. NAMA members or not, this is open to the public, so happy you could all join us today. As usual, feel free to write into the comment section where you're coming from. We always love to see where folks are coming from around North America. So please just say welcome and let us know where you're chiming in from. We're going to be getting going shortly. We already have a few of our speakers all lined up and ready to go. We're just going to wait for some of the participants to come on in. There we go. Sarah from Sacramento. We're already spanning. So, Gordon, where are you at right now?
I live in Napa, California.
Napa, California. Wade, where are you?
Knoxville, Tennessee.
Tennessee. Spike, you're in Rhode Island, right?
The greatest little state there is.
And then I am in Ontario, Canada. So you got basically two Northeasterns and two Southerners, I suppose, if we were to group Wade and Gordon together in a group. And who else do we have from our chat? We got Brian in Washington, North Carolina. We got Dara in Southern Vermont. Julie in Pomona, California, of course. Timothy, also from North Carolina. Thank you so much, Brooke. Appreciate it. Barb in Oregon Coast. Ashley, Pennsylvania. Lovely. Thank you so much for participating, guys. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. We obviously do this for you guys. April in Arkansas. Just gonna wait a few minutes. Normally we have like 3, 4, 5 times this many people, so I'm not sure if people are just slowly coming in or if we just have a smaller group today, but smaller groups are good. That leads to a much more casual Q&A at the end usually. So yeah, just wait a couple of minutes more. Meanwhile, how about we get going with some of the housekeeping here? We do have a few things that I want to bring up just before we get into the actual business of the webinar, so to speak. So just to welcome you all, my name is Rob Corto. I am a second VP for the NAMA executive, and I am also on the culinary committee. So feel free to, if you have any questions about NAMA in general or the culinary committee, you can always reach out to me. We do have, obviously, Gordon, Wade, and Spike, who are all part of the culinary committee, and Julie, our fearless culinary committee leader, is also a participant in this call. So feel free to reach out to Julia as well if you have any questions about the culinary committee. So a few housekeeping items. So the first is we've just launched our Chop Challenge for 2025. So this is now seems to be a pretty reoccurring thing. We've been doing this for a few years now. It always spurs a lot of creativity with people doing little culinary things. So there is a scholarship to be won for the NAMA annual foray that's being held in Vermont this year on September 11th to 14th, I believe it is. So if you are interested, we have the Chop Challenge. The deadline is May 1st. So, you got to get out there and get everything done. If you're interested, I just dropped the link into the chat for more details on the Chop Challenge. And Spike is going to talk to us a little bit about that a little later. So look out for that. Another little thing that you should have already received in your emails, but I'm no doubt going to be mentioning here. The Mycofile just came out. Mycofile Quarterly just came out. A great one. There's tons of really good information, important information, in fact. So you should definitely go and check out the Mycofile, read it, do the crossword at the end. There's a lot of fun things going on in the Mycofile. Every edition just gets better and better, guys. So definitely be sure to check that out. I'm going to drop that link right into the chat as well for you all. Right now, there's information in there about scholarships that are going out. There's some results from a recent BioBlitz And we have another contest, the Foray logo contest is out. So there's a lot going on. It's great for all of you, or even your clubs if you're interested. I'm sure there's someone who has artistic talent in one of your clubs that would love to participate in the Foray logo contest. So be sure to spread the news and get people out. I'd mentioned if you had any questions about the culinary committee, we're always looking for new members. We're always happy to have people join us. We're a great group of people that get together once every couple of weeks and just, shoot the about food and mushrooms. So if you're interested, please email our fearless leader, Julie, at culinaryarts@namico.org. And two last things. If you're ever interested in cooking any of the recipes that we throw out there in these webinars and all the webinars, but also beyond just what we do in our webinars, there is a recipe section on the NAMA website. So you can go and check out all the recipes. The entire look of it has been redone. It looks spectacular, guys. So I definitely recommend that you just go and check that out and maybe bookmark it, use it throughout the summer because there's going to be a lot of different mushrooms that are on there. So again, I've thrown it down into the chat, namico.org/interest culinary recipes. So a great little area for that. And lastly, there is a little poll that I would love if you guys were to check out. There's only 6 questions. It's pretty minimal. I'm just going to leave that open for all of you. You may have just received a pop-up. I'm not really sure how it works on Zoom, but regardless, a little poll is available. You might have to click on polls at the bottom of the screen, or maybe you just got a pop-up. Again, not really sure how this all works within Zoom, but if you can fill out that poll, it would be greatly appreciated. It's just going to help us plan one of our upcoming culinary events. So it'd be great if we had some input from those who care. So without further ado, that's the housekeeping for now. There's quite a bit of it. And we are going to start getting into the actual content of this webinar. So we do have 4 speakers today, plus myself. I'm just introducing people. I'm just a little host here. We have 3 who are sitting here with us right now, like Spike, Wade, and Gordon. But we have a 4th one who's going to be leading us off here, and it's Kristen. Unfortunately, Kristen kind of double booked herself, and so she wasn't able to be here in person, but that's okay. She recorded a beautiful little video to kind of help us get into the mindset of Morel season, which is just around the corner from us, and will be kind of the highlight of this entire webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen with this video and sound on. However, sometimes some people have some issues with the Wi-Fi connection, and it becomes very choppy when it goes through Zoom. So if you are interested in watching this video and you are having any technical issues, I'm putting the link right into the comments as well, so you can just watch it directly and then just join us back in the webinar. So the link is in there. I'm going to share my screen, and this is going to be about a 14-minute video, and then we'll come back and continue on. So without further ado, let's get started.
Hello, NAMA. My name is Kristen Blizzard. Trent, your president, is my better half. And somehow I've been given the honor of talking about everyone's favorite spring mushroom, morels. So let's get into it. Let me share my screen here. All right, we are going to be talking today about finding and cooking morels. It is a spring thing, as we all know. Exciting. Morels are one of the most beloved wild mushrooms. As you guys know, they've been hunted for generations and generations, and people have secret spots, and there's a mania surrounding this mushroom. They have a huge, wide distribution range, as you can see from this map on the right here. This is from inaturalist.org. Over all time, they've recorded 30,460 observations. They are distributed throughout all of North America. All these sort of pinkish dots here represent morel observations up into Canada, down into Mexico, and mostly in the Midwest and East, and over there in the Pacific Northwest and West Coast areas. Morels are a mycorrhizal mushroom. That means they have a symbiotic relationship with the tree. So therefore, tree associations are very, very important. You are not going to find a morel without a tree association. They are sharing, morels are sharing nutrients with the trees, and trees are passing back sugars to the mushroom. Many of the wild mushrooms we enjoy, as you know, have this relationship. Those tree associations are going to vary from east to west and Midwest. So you are not going to find morels with the same kinds of trees necessarily in all these different regions. So it's really, really important to know that your associations. When to hunt morels. I like to use the internet for timing. iNaturalist will kind of give you an idea of where. It'll give you an idea of forest types and tree species. So that's always a great tool to use. That's inaturalist.org. There's a tool at thegreatmorel.com. Every year they keep a map of the first morel sightings, and as many people want to publish their sightings, they put them up on the map. So it's kind of, that's a good indicator of when to start keeping your eye out. And then I also like to use Facebook groups. Everybody likes to share their finds. They're not going to tell you where exactly, but just the fact that they're showing up and the timing, another good indicator to get out there and start looking. Environmental factors are going to be important too, and we'll talk about that in a second. But finally, natural morels are hard to find, guys. So you're going to have to get your boots on the ground and just be prepared to put in some work. All right, here's an overview of tree species that have relationships with morels all over the US. You'll see Midwest and East, and I'm going to go through these kind of fast, maybe take a picture of this slide. It's great. These have all either come from my own experience or trusted individuals on the internet. In the Midwest, ash, elm, apple, black oak, popple, tulip poplar, cottonwood, sycamore, hickory, black cherry, and black walnut. Colorado Rockies, we have cottonwood and riparian areas, native willow, aspen, spruce, true fir, Doug fir, and pine. Pacific Northwest, we have grand fir, beautiful tree, true fir, cottonwood, madrone, white oak, Doug fir, and pine. And then burn morels are going to be mixed western conifer species, western red cedar, pine, lodgepole ponderosa, true fir, spruce, Doug fir, hemlock. I may not have gotten everything into here, but this is a really good list of trees to pay attention to. Morels also love riparian areas. They like dead and dying trees, especially ash and elm in the Midwest and East. They like fertile soil, and they like wildfires in west of the Rockies. They are going to grow in a wildfire scar the spring season after the wildfire, as long as the right types of trees were burned. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. All right, environmental factors to know. Soil temperature is actually the biggest correlation of morel fruitings. So it's kind of nice to keep the 40, 50, 60 rule in your pocket as a general indicator, and that is 40 degrees at night, 50-degree soil temperature, and 60 degrees during the day. It's a good general indication for when morels might start fruiting. Natural morels have a pretty short window, 4 to 6 weeks if you're lucky. Bird morels that are showing up in wildfires west of the Rockies are going to have a longer window. Those begin at lower elevations, and as the season progresses, they can be found in areas like Colorado, for example, in the Rockies up to 11,000 feet, well into August and even early September if you've had a lot of consistent rain throughout the season. The big thing with morels, though, whether it's burn morels or natural morels, you're going to have to put in your work. And really that means learning the trees, learning the ecology. They like floodplains, they like fertile soil, they like previously burned areas, previously farmed areas, and get your boots on the ground and just do some scouting and don't get disappointed. Have a lot of patience. This wouldn't be an AMA webinar if I didn't give you a PSA from the education committee, and that is, guys, morels can be dangerous. They do contain a toxin that is dissipated with heat, which means you want to cook them really, really well, and you want to make sure you're in a ventilated area when you're cooking them. You know, you wouldn't eat raw chicken. Please don't eat raw morels. They can be serious and in some cases have even led to death. So let's please make sure we're cooking our morels very well. And we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, morels in the kitchen. You're going to want to clean these guys well before you put them into the basket. You can see morels have all these sort of like pits and valleys in them. You can imagine if I had a big dirt ball on the end of that thing and I dumped it in my basket with a bunch of others, the dirt tends to just get right into those pits and get lodged in there. So the more you clean in the field, the less work you have to do when you get home. Do not be afraid to wash with water. I like to put all my wild mushrooms into water, and I'm not afraid of it. One thing I will do is try to put them under a fan and get them sort of back to a natural state before you put them in a dehydrator. Burn morel field processing is a bit different. We're talking pounds and pounds of morels potentially in a very short period of time. And often we are out in the woods without access to, you know, modern conveniences. So we are hanging them, we are putting them right into dehydrators, and we're sort of worrying about cleaning them later. I'll talk about that in a minute. Trent and I have done quite a few preservation tests with morels, and personally I have found that whether you dehydrate, freeze dry, cook and freeze, or freeze them raw, they're all going to turn out really well in the kitchen. They're very forgiving, they're meaty, they're dense. Didn't seem to matter which way we preserved them. I honestly don't really have a favorite. We tend to dehydrate just because it's easiest for us. So I've put a few questions in here to answer since this is pre-recorded. This first question came from Julie Schreiber. When do you wash and clean your burn morels? Before they go into the dehydrator or at some point after? Julie likes to wash her mushrooms before really well with water. Trent and I tend to worry about them after, and that's mostly because we're in the field getting a lot of burn morels. After they come out of the dehydrator and you put them in a Ziploc or whatever, you'll find that if you kind of shake it around, a lot of that sort of ash and dirt that comes out of the wildfire is going to show up as sort of a layer in the bottom of your bag. I will also agitate them really well when I'm rehydrating them, and I'll talk about that in a second. I think the next question came from Donna Kent. If I dehydrate my morels, does the heat from the dehydrator take care of the toxicity? Scientifically, I don't know the answer to that question, but I am always better safe than sorry. So I'm going to say no, it doesn't take care of it. Please go ahead and just cook them really well anyways. I don't think you want to find out is the real answer there. So please cook your morels well. And don't just count on that heat from the dehydrator. And final questions, should I cook morels before using them in something baked, such as quiche? Again, I'm going to say yes, please cook them before. I always do. I always do the method we're going to talk about here next before I put them in anything, baked or not. All right, so morels in the kitchen. You'll see I've got little pictures here that correlate to each step. We are going to assume we're starting from dehydrated. If you're starting with raw morels, go ahead and just tune out until we hit step 6 here. So first thing I do is boil water in the same thing I use to make my tea. And I'm going to use sort of that double bowl system. I pour the boiling water over the dehydrated morels, and then I weigh it down with another bowl. And I'm going to leave them there for at least 15 to 20 minutes to rehydrate. You'll notice once they do rehydrate, and you can see in the bottom left photo, I've got that beautiful amber liquid. You can decide to use that liquid in cooking or not. It's up to you. I tend to do it. I think there's a lot of flavor in that liquid. This is where, though, with burn morels, I'm going to first pour the liquid through a strainer, and you can see that I did that. Most of that is little bits of mushroom, but there's some, you know, gritty bits in there as well that you mostly can get out through a fine mesh strainer. So with burn morels, pour them through a strainer, set that liquid aside, and then next steps, I'm going to rinse them again. You'll see there's that beautiful sort of amber liquid there. But I rinse them probably 2 more times with the burn morel and really agitate them in the water before I put them into the pan. Then I'm gonna squeeze out that liquid, put them in the pan, and I poured the amber liquid that I saved over the top of them. And you can see in this image, I'm going to put about that much water into the pan and then bring that up to a simmer until the water evaporates or sort of gets sucked back into the mushrooms. It's going to take probably another 15 minutes or so to do that. And doing that will take care of your cooking them well. I tend to add water like that in the pan with any wild mushrooms that I'm cooking. I find that it's just a really nice way to get them nicely cooked. And then once the water evaporates, that's the point when I'm going to introduce butter to the pan. And you can see I introduced a lot of butter to this pan. But once you've kind of evaporated the water, incorporated your butter into the mushrooms, at that point you can go ahead and pop them right in your mouth from the pan, or you can put them into your quiche or your stroganoff or whatever it is you're cooking. All right, look at this. Here is our wonderful 4A registrar, Peggy Green, with beautiful blonde mushrooms from Missouri. Look at all those beauties. Those are naturals. Thank you, Peggy, for the photo. Also, thanks Lisa Suits, Mike Snyder, and Trent for some of the other beautiful photos in this presentation. These are just resources, and I will provide a QR code or a link to this presentation so anybody can use it. We have a lot of information on our Trent and I on the Modern Forager blog and also on GeoForger about burn morels if you're curious. And then I'm just going to leave you with a few adages here. This is one of my favorite culinary adages. If it's not hollow, don't swallow. As you should know, the inside of morel mushrooms are completely hollow. Their lookalikes like Gyromitra or Verpas are going to have stuff inside the mushroom, sort of pithy interiors, folds, things like that. Morels tend to be hollow on the inside. And then these are great sort of hunting tips here, and I'll just leave them up for you. I'm not going to read them all. But these are sort of natural indicators, you know, elm leaves, mayaples, box turtles waking up. That's my favorite from Brooke Reed. Red bud in flower, lilacs are blooming. These are some of the things that you can use to kind of know that morels are going to be popping soon. So hope you enjoy this. Happy hunting out there.
Lovely. Well, I hope you all enjoyed Kristen's. I realized while I was playing that I didn't actually introduce Kristen, probably because out of sight, out of mind, but I will do it now. So Kristen does live in Oregon, but her interest in mushrooms actually started in Colorado. Kristen truly fell down the rabbit hole when she met Trent, NAMA's current president. And together they run a company called Modern Forager, where you can reach out at modern-forager.com. Which focuses predominantly on morels, and they have also put out a cookbook together. It's a cookbook and foraging guide called Wild Mushrooms. So, and lastly, Kirsten is actually NAMA's website chair. So if you have any suggestions on the website or anything like that, you can reach out to Kristen, and she will see what you can do on that front. In the chat, I'm just going to drop in her website as well as her Instagram. Her Instagram is @KristenBlizzard. And again, her website was modern-forager.com. And yeah. So we would like to, of course, thank Kristen for putting together that video for us. There was a lot to grasp in that. But morels are here. Our next speaker is going to be Gordon. So I'm going to introduce him before he does this thing.
Well, I'm gonna run off and go get ready for the demo, but please mention this.
Okay, well, you all see this, right? So there's a great book that you should definitely go out and buy. Like, I don't even know why you haven't yet, to be honest. So go out and do it. Gordon, you could drop a link in the website for where people can purchase the book.
Sure. It's on every major book retailer, anywhere ever. But it's called Passport to Kingdom Fungi, and that will get you what you're looking for.
There you go. I did just drop in on his Gordon's Instagram website, so fascinatedbyfungi.com. I'm sure there's going to be information on his website about the book, and also his Instagram, which is @fascinatedbyfungi. So
I don't know if I can email or send anything to the chat at large, but if you can repost this link, that is the link for Amazon.
Sure, I can do that.
Perfect. Thanks. I'm going to sign off and go boot up on the thing. I'll see you in a
Sounds
second.
good. All right, see you in a second. So here's a little bio. So Gordon has lived across the US, but it was really in New Zealand where he rekindled a childhood interest in mushrooms and began posting pictures of his finds to social media as at Fascinated by Fungi. So some of you may be aware of that. Gordon shares his passion quite openly with quite a big group. In fact, it's well over 2.5 million followers now. So pretty big following. He is dedicated to educating people about biology and chemistry and ecology of mushrooms, as well as the culinary and cultural practices surrounding them. So he is part of the culinary committee. We're happy to have him on. And today he's going to be doing a little demo, and we're pretty excited to have him do that. Demo's probably going to last somewhere between the vicinity of 10 and 20 minutes, probably more around the 15-minute mark. And now that he's here, I will hand it over to him. Gordon, you're sideways. Hi.
Am I? Nope, that didn't work. Eh?
No.
Okay, let me. The only way to do this, let me try again.
Again, just a little reminder of the poll. If you guys haven't done it already, we would definitely appreciate that you guys fill out that poll for us. Thank you.
Is this better? Are we in the correct orientation?
It's perfect. I'm going to spotlight you for everyone. And it's all yours, Gordon. Take it away.
Okay, awesome. Hi, guys. My name's Gordon, and I'm going to show you how to make kind of a quick sourdough, discard, savory morel, green onion pancake kind of thing. And if you want more instructions on how to do this, the recipe will be posted online, and I also did a live stream on my channel, which you can watch. But this is going to be a little bit different the last time I make it, because I can never make anything the same twice. But the core concept here is when you keep sourdough around, you tend to have bits of sourdough that are old and kind of gross, and it's hard to know what to do with that. So I like making savory pancakes, and that's what I'm going to show you guys how to do. So this comes together pretty quickly. I'm just going to take some of the sourdough discard that's all kind of liquidy and funky smelling and stick it in the bottom of this jar or this bowl. And I'll refill my jar here and get that going a little later and put that to the side. I am going to add, for liquid ingredient, I got a duck egg. That's what I have around, so I'm going to use that. Eggs are expensive these days, so I have friends who have ducks, and I got some eggs. I am going to add a little bit of morel powder here as a sort of extra seasoning, because I will use morels in this, but I want to really enhance the morel flavor. So we're going to add some dried morel powder here to really bump up the morel flavor. And I love doing that, sort of using ingredients on multiple levels to really enhance the core characteristics. And I've got mostly AP flour here, but it's also mixed with a little bit of Wade's dry aged black truffle and koji fermented rice flour. So I'm going to dump that in as well. And now we've got kind of a thick, pasty mix here that I'm going to have to introduce some liquid to. So as a way, again, to kind of bump up the morel flavor, I rehydrated some morels, and I'm going to use the liquid from this as the liquid in these pancakes. And I'm just using a little bit of strainer to help filter out any junk that comes off my morels. When I have morels and I'm going to dry them, I like to give them a quick wash so that I can take them out and just use them without having to worry too much about what's in there. But I do sort of tend to decant or filter the liquid even after washing, because morels are incredibly dirty because of their high surface area. And so it's just, a good technique to always sort of filter it. Okay, so I've got this incorporated. And I do have, like I said, measurements in the recipe, although I tend to sort of just wing everything and do it all by eye, which is exactly what I'm doing now. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit of baking soda, or baking powder rather. And if you wanted to, you could make this and let it sit for a couple hours, and that the sourdough itself would provide the rise for these pancakes. But since we're doing this kind of quickly, I'm just going to add a little bit of baking powder to help, get it elevated, as it were. I'm going to add some of this Shared Cultures koji salt, which is a great way to kind of, again, enhance umami and put another fermented fungal element into this dish. So we've got morels, we've got yeast, we've got koji. That's at least 3 kinds of fungi. You could absolutely do this with any kind of dried mushroom that you want. Doesn't have to be morels. I just happen to like morels. And also I have these, I think in my recipe called for green onion, but these are tri-cornered leeks. So I was just out walking around my neighborhood the other day and I found these sort of invasive wild spring onion type things, and I'm going to use them because why not use wild forage foods that taste great, and there's free food on the side of the road, and I'm helping to remove invasive species. So all those things got me excited, and I'm using them. I got a little bit of dill. I just like herbs, so I dumped some of that in, and I'm going to take my morels here, and we'll kind of pull them out of the liquid and chop them up just so they be cut a little bit smaller, and you don't get too big of a piece, nor will it mess up the texture of the pancake. If it's too large, it kind of breaks the pancake. So we're going to make them a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to run my knife through this quickly. Oh, I need to also turn my pan on. Here we go. Preheat your pan. I'm using a cast iron, and we're just going to kind of chop through these. Okay, so we've got morels, boom. And we're going to dump these into our batter. Wow, there we go. Okay. And just because I love cheese, I'm using a mixture of shredded, kind of like Mexican taco cheese, and a little bit of cotija. But you could use really any kind of cheese you want. And I'm just going to kind of stir this together until we get sort of a goopy, thick, but still loose enough batter that I can pour it into a pan and get this cooked off as a pancake, kind of as quick as we can here. So that looks pretty goopy and set. I'm actually pretty happy with the texture on that. I'm going to add just the tiniest bit more liquid just to make sure that the batter flows freely. We got one more morel we'll dump in. And I'm going to add just a hint of black pepper and maybe just a little more koji salt, because I always know that morels and mushrooms do better with more salt. They're kind of like a potato that, most foods are best at about 2% salt by volume kind of thing, but mushrooms and potatoes do best when they're at about 2.5%. They just taste more like themselves. And so I'd rather overshoot the salt ever so slightly and make this more savory, more delicious than undershooting it. And once these are made, you can use these pancakes as, a vehicle for delivery of any number of delicious things. I'm just shifting my island over here, butcher block. All right, there we go. So I've got my pan heating up. Sort of medium high heat is usually what I use for this kind of thing. And I'm just going to put a little bit of oil in the pan, and I'll spread that around. And when making savory pancakes, you really can't be afraid to use a good amount of oil, because that's part of what gets them crispy, and it's part of what makes them taste good. And this is a relatively healthy dish. We got onions, we got morels, we got a little bit of cheese, but it's not a super high fat dish kind of thing. So I'm just going to kind of sploot in some pancake mix here, and we'll get these cooked off, and I'll show you what it looks like. So this, oops, guess I'm making one giant mega pancake. I was trying to separate these out, but all right, screw it. We're making a harache. There we go. This is what we get with live cooking. We have one long mono pancake. I was going to try to do, usually do about 4 in the pan, but now we're doing one big one. So we'll just heat this up and let it rock. So I'm bringing it down, take a look at it. If I wanted to, I could sprinkle a little bit of salt or sprinkle more cheese. This is a super adaptable recipe and concept that you can do with virtually anything you want. But it's just nice to have this in your repertoire, and especially if you're into making sourdough or doing other forms of, bakery kind of stuff. It's nice to have a place to dump all this excess sourdough. If you don't have sourdough discard, you could probably use buttermilk to provide a very similar kind of sour element to this dish. And you could easily make this dish vegan as well by substituting out the egg for one of those sort of egg substitute like products. So I'm just going to cook this until it gets a little bit dark around the edges, and I can tell the middle is more set, because if I try to move it right now, the whole thing will fall apart. But if I give it, another couple of minutes and really get the oil, evenly spread around the pancake, a little bit of moisture there, so we're spitting just a bit. Bring the camera back just a tiny bit so I don't get hot oil on my phone. But I mean, this is pretty much the process, And I like doing slightly smaller pancakes because I didn't mean to do this one big pancake. And slightly smaller pancakes will cook ever so slightly faster, just because there's sort of more surface area being exposed to heat. But this will get there in just a moment. So I'm going to be patient with it, and tell you guys too, my sort of favorite ways to cook morels are really any way you want, because I think in this country there's a sort of a fascination / obsession with cooking them either by like dredging and frying them and cooking them in a bunch of butter or as a cream sauce. And maybe once in a while you see morels in any other kind of dish, but often when I use morels for international cooking, because I've done Indian dishes, I've done Chinese dishes, I've done South American dishes with morels, and people tell me that somehow I'm wasting them because I'm not doing this sort of very codified way of cooking morels in butter or in a cream sauce. And I categorically reject that. I think that is just wrong. I think you can be creative and use morels in whatever way you want and really maximize the various aspects of their flavor and texture. And, too, like I was talking about earlier, I love to use morels in different forms. So every time I use fresh, I often also use dried, and you can have rehydrated dried ones as well as dried powder that you're using. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility with how to build your layers of flavor in a dish like this. You get under here, make sure we're floating free. Feel a little bit of sticking, but that's okay because I've got my thing here. Okay, now we're moving. And if this had been 2 pancakes like I meant it to be, this flip would be easier. But we're gonna see, we got a little stickage because it's sort of stuck in the middle. So I do recommend making slightly smaller pancakes, or also having a slightly better preheated pan. That was the other issue. I didn't get this preheated quite warm enough before I stuck everything in there, but we're about to flip. So I'm gonna put down a tiny bit more oil. I'm gonna show you guys what this looks like. Sometimes you're doing big pancakes, it helps to kind of use a plate to turn it out. And or letting it cook longer would also be beneficial, because I can see it sort of coming apart in the middle. So I just need to give it just a second more. Sorry about that. There's pressure to get this done quickly, and cooking is one of those things that you gotta sometimes take time to get something fully done. But you can, when you're doing something like this, also like kind of spoon a little bit of hot oil over it, and that really does help get everything all nice and crispy. Okay, I'm gonna flip this just because we're in a bit of a rush. There we go, nice and brown. That looks lovely. So pretty much at this point, I can drop the heat just a bit and let it just kind of cook through. And I've got enough to make, about 4 portions worth of pancakes. And I ate a bunch of these the other day with some hot sauce. You put a little bit of yogurt on it. You could melt more cheese and make little kind of grilled cheese things out of them. You could make taco things and put some short rib in there. You could really do anything you want. But it's just a basic recipe concept and outline for you guys to follow and hopefully inspire some good stuff. So that's my morel pancake, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. But stick whatever you have in the garden in some sourdough discard, add some flour, add an egg, whip it up, add some seasoning, put it in a hot oily pan, and enjoy. So I'm gonna sign off, and hopefully you guys think about doing this yourself.
Lovely. Thank you, Gordon. Much appreciated. It does look like a delicious pancake, and I agree with Brooke, who wrote in the comments that this is a perfect golden. And I agree. I mean, you don't know what you're going to get when you flip it, right? So you're like, oh my God, I hope this isn't going to be terrible. I'm live here, but no, look at that. Phenomenal, beautiful. And I agree with the herbs and stuff like that too. I think that you're gonna have to tell us how that tastes, because I would definitely eat it.
But it tasted really, really good last time I did it. But that's the thing is every time I cook something, I feel like I innovate one new thing or several new things. And so it's going to be a little bit different. And I love that about a dish like this, because you can take the basic outline and structure of a recipe and really just riff with whatever you have on hand that's fresh in your kitchen, including the mushrooms, including the herbs. You know, it's super adaptable.
Yeah, no, I actually, yeah, I agree with you absolutely 100%. Yeah, still just watching you cook there. I'm getting hungry. I already ate dinner, but I'm hungry. All right. Well, let's move on, eh? By the way, Gordon, you still had a couple of minutes. I don't know what you were rushing for. So, okay, moving on. Spike. Spike is next.
Hi there. Hello.
So for all of you who have been to one of our webinars, you've no doubt seen Spike already. I think he's been a constant across every webinar, maybe missed one or two, but definitely a constant across most of them. So here's the bio that many of you might have heard already. Absolutely going to read it out again. So Spike is an executive chef at Pot au Feu Bistro in Providence, Rhode Island, where he gets to prepare and serve foraged ingredients. You can't find it in any other menu in New England. Spike is actually Rhode Island's first mushroom forager, approved by the state to sell wild mushrooms commercially. And he teaches the state certification program as well, once a year, for all those who are interested in foraging mushrooms for local restaurants and markets. Definitely someone great to have on hand to tell us all about this and that. I'm going to be posting some links into the chat if you want to ever see anything by him. There's an Instagram and there's a YouTube. The YouTube channel is Seditious, SEDITIOUS 100. That's the username on YouTube. I'm not going to go into his Instagram because it's a convoluted set of numbers and letters that have no.
I can say it if you want. 1WD, 2EF, 3RG, 4TH, 5YJ, 6UK, 7IL is my Instagram handle.
How in the world do you?
That's my email account that I made when I was like 12. So easy to remember.
That's literally insane. Okay, well, there you go, folks.
So my Instagram is just my portfolio of dishes that I like to cook with mushrooms. And, if you go old enough, it was actually seafood because I ran a seafood joint. But I do want to specify my YouTube channel is strictly Amanita videos for the public. So I have a lot of cooking videos on there, which are unlisted. So if you ever find a link, like tonight, we have links of different things we put on there. And once you have the link, you can go in. But I do want to specify that it is an Amanita themed YouTube channel to the public. So
very well noted. Thank you, Spike. So we did mention that we're going to be talking a little bit about the Chop Challenge. First, we got a little video by Spike. Obviously, I mean, for those who are familiar with how the Culinary Committee typically does webinars, sometimes we can do them live as Gordon just showed. But you got to obviously have some quick recipes in hand in order to do them live, because we only have so much time in these webinars, and we want to give you as much content as possible in just that 1 hour period. So anything that takes a little bit more time, or our more lengthy outdoor explainers, we tend to do videos of them, but we try to mix it up with a little bit of demo, live demo, and a little bit of video. So this one, even though Spike is here today and live, and will be talking to us a little bit about the Chop Challenge afterwards, we will first be starting with one of the videos that he recorded for this webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to get that video going. Yeah, we'll go from there. So here we go.
So I'm here to talk about a few spring edible mushrooms that you may find here in New England during spring. I know other speakers tonight will be focusing on morels, so I'll be focusing on the other edible mushrooms you may not want to skip over this spring while out foraging. One that coincides with morel season are Gyromitra, such as this Gyromitra corfi, one of our smaller species, or you may come across one of our larger species, like this member of the Gigas group. Do note that there are some taxonomic changes currently in the Dyskinesia, so names are a bit shaky. Cordyceps. These are Ophiocordyceps ravenelli. It's a fungus that infects insect grubs and fruits from their heads once the takeover is complete. These make a flavorful stock when simmered in water. The most common one I find in spring is Cordyceps militaris, which I've dubbed the false Cheeto of the woods. Oyster mushrooms. Two common spring oysters we have here in New England are Pleurotus populinus and Pleurotus pulmonarius. Both are equally delicious. Sometimes I like to wrap the fronds in bacon, roasted, and put on top of grains. Or for something healthier, here's a chilled oyster mushroom chimichurri salad, which I've paired with actual oysters that are deep fried. Pheasant backs, Cereoporus squamosus, a delectable spring edible when you find them before they age too much and get too tough. When you find them in a very young antler stage, they don't need a lot of preparation and can be rubbed with herbs and oil before grilling. When they're a little older, they can be sliced thin and seared for a pasta component. Reishi. This is a Ganoderm, one of our hemlock lovers, Ganoderma tsuge. Of all the Ganoderma we have in New England, this is the only one that's not bitter, only if you find it in its youngest fruiting stage, which I call the marshmallow stage. Once these buttons begin to varnish and redden, they will be too bitter to eat. So if you come across these at the right time, collect them and treat them like puffballs. Here they've been sliced and seared in a garlic butter to complement the filet mignon. These ones are coconut encrusted, fried nice and crispy with a mango salsa. Ink caps. We have a variety of ink caps that pop up here in New England during spring. From our Copernellus mica caps with their glittery vellum and cespitose clusters, to our Parasola, like these Parasola auricoma, highlighting their vibrant red tones on the cap. Our hare's foot ink cap in Copernopsis, which can be tasty little treats. Here, I poached them alongside some tubifera slime molds to complement the salad. Or you can let your ink caps deliquesce into ink and fold them into pasta to color the noodles, like this dish using some spring chicken. And speaking of spring chicken, a shout out to Laetoporus. That's a sulfur shelf in the photo. But our most common chicken to occur in spring is Laetoporus cincinnatus, known for its terrestrial growth, rosette form, and white pore surface. I like to fold these into quiche, which makes a light dish for spring that pairs well with a salad. Our two early season agarics, the deer shield and the platyful mushroom, sometimes grow side by side. The Megacolybia is more robust, with very thick white gills that are widely spaced apart and connect to the stem. And our deer shields have tightly compact gills that are free from the stem, and they eventually turn pink. So here is an example side by side showing the gill connection of each of those two mushrooms. And here's some fried Pluteus caps I've stuffed with Phylocypha and prosciutto. The mighty wine cap. I probably collect more of these than any other mushroom during spring. They get their name from the typical wine red pigmentation seen on their pellicle. But don't be fooled. They also come in a golden yellow color, which I find tastier than the red. But they can also come in orange, or they can come in brown. And I've even seen them bleach out to white, which gives them the appearance of a Strobilomyces bolete. So don't be confused. The characteristics are the same on all of them, is that they have black to purple spore coloration, and they also have a cogwheel annulus to them. The first dish I make with them every spring is a Stropharia gravy, so I can make a wine cap poutine. While talking about spring mulch mushrooms, worth noting that Gymnopus gyrophilus group, which can be a tasty edible, our crack-capped Agrosabe sororia and Agrosabe smithii, and our Agrosabe praecox group, which is differentiated from the other two because it has an annulus. The small ones are pretty abundant and work great in a compound butter, like here where I've stuffed snail shells. Stinkhorns. This is a mutinous egg. A good party hors d'oeuvre is sliced in half, seared up, and placed on a canapé with some goat cheese. And here is a phallus egg. I personally don't care for the texture of the receptaculum in the egg, so I prefer to hatch the eggs, which work great battered and deep fried as a vegan calamari. This is a pseudocolus, another good one to use in egg form, as it lacks the crunchy receptaculum found in the phallus species. Getting into cups and jellies. Our Pizziza, or ex-Pizziza here, this is Phylocypha phylogena, and this is Pizziza repanda. Two fantastic edible spring cup fungi. And our witch's butter, tremellatoid jellies, which can include Dicryomyces, Dicryopinax, Phaeotremella, Exidia, as in this Exidia crenata right here, also known as brown jelly rolls. And of course we have our wood ear auricularia mushrooms. Now I love to use jelly mushrooms in desserts, like these burgundy poached apples stuffed with cider auricularia, or this Exidia creme brulee made with candied jelly rolls. And here is a tremella flan made with some Phaeotremella. There are many other mushrooms that you may find during spring here in New England, but I think I touched base on most of what I would consider choice ingredients that you may come across while foraging, so you can add them to your repertoire and eat wild. Happy hunting.
Lovely. Thank you, Spike.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was actually really wonderful, and I definitely appreciate, as a Canadian, that you've made a poutine. That always makes me happy.
Yeah, it's every spring. That's my favorite. The first dish I make is that poutine. It's just so good with the striparia.
I mean, you definitely gave a lot of ideas there that I would never have considered in my wildest dreams. So,
Yeah, we got a lot of good edible mushrooms that aren't morels here in New England, because you know what? We don't have a lot of morels here in New England.
yeah, I mean, most of those don't come up for me until I'd say early summer, but we're pretty northern where we are. I mean, Rhode Island's pretty north, but I'm even more north. So,
Yeah.
anyways, lovely. Thank you so much for that. It was amazing content for 7 minutes. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
But you wanted to chop challenge as well, right?
Yeah, I did want to talk. You mentioned it at the beginning of this webinar. So this will be the third time that we're doing our Chop Challenge, which is a scholarship towards our annual foray. As you mentioned, it's going to be in Vermont. It was featured in the last Mycophile quarterly that came out like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I know we do have a submission form on the NAMA website for anybody that wants to get in. Agrosophy praecox is delicious and so abundant. I saw that memo. But yes, the Chop Challenge. So we have it, and today is April 2nd. So the deadline for everybody, is a reminder, it is May 1st. So we have the end of the month, and we will choose the winners by June 1st. And I actually made a video for this webinar. And as Robert mentioned, sometimes we have to do these live quick recipes. Just to let you know, my submission for this year's Chop Challenge is, it took me over a day to make, by the time I had to proof everything and churn everything. So Robert put up a photo here. So our 5 ingredients that we're using this year is going to be molasses, Vegemite, banana, pistachio, and wild mushrooms of your choice. So I like how I finished my little slideshow on these spring edibles with jellies, because I made a dessert here, so I decided to use jellies. So here in the photo, I made a molasses bread that I turned into French toast. So it's a banana stuffed French toast made with molasses bread that's encrusted with the pistachios. And I made a Vegemite ice cream, which came out fantastic, by the way. That I folded in some reconstituted auricularia wood ears and a few chopped pistachios. So just to let everybody know, when I saw these 5 ingredients, I was Anadama bread. I don't know what that is, Gordon. It was a molasses bread. That was the key component to the bread. Came out very sticky in the pans and very sweet and very dark brown with the dark molasses that I used. So I did want to mention that we do have I see that memo. All right, I'll take your word for it. I must have used a southern recipe when I was, hunting down something to use. But it did come out. It did. Now this is not to be confused with brown bread, which gets cooked in the can. That is a very, very dark molasses bread. But I do have a recipe for this dish. It is on the NAMA website in the recipe folders. And I also have a video to show everybody the steps from start to finish on how to make this. I'm not sure if Robert can pull up the link to the YouTube. And I will be sharing it to the NAMA Facebook page as a video to show everybody as well. And it coincides with the recipe that's typed up in print form as my submission for this year's Chop Challenge.
Thank you. I did just get a question. So, so for anyone who's watching this as a recording, Gordon had wrote into the chat that Anadama bread is a regional molasses bread for New England. So that's what Spike was responding to. We have a little question about being able to interact between attendees, which I'm trying to figure out on the spot here. But I'm not seeing how to do that. So might be something that I have to do before the presentation begins, in which case, my apologies. Okay, well, without further ado, Spike, you good on the Chop Challenge front?
I am. I didn't know if anybody had questions. Like I said, this is the third time we do it, so hopefully we're getting the hang of it. And any questions, really, if you go to the NAMA website, to our submission form, should have everything spelled out. Nice. And we always use 5 ingredients. So those are the 5 ingredients we used. Yeah, that's it.
We do choose ingredients that should be more or less readily available to people, at least, through a simple online order. What do you got, Gordon?
I just want to show everyone the sort of final product there, a little pancake. And I took a bite, and the dill was a really nice addition. I feel like it brought a little extra background to just the green onion. Serving suggestion wise, Julie had suggested to me that I put caviar on this. And I was like, I would love to. And if NAMA wants to, reimburse me for a tin of caviar, I will put caviar on this. So maybe in a future webinar.
Question for you, Gordon, since we're looking at your pancake there. If you had left it to rest, do you think it would have risen a little bit more? Risen?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the point of using sourdough discard. But what I like about this is you can just go ahead and make it and immediately fry it in a pan, or you could let it sit around for a couple hours and get a few more bubbles. You probably don't want to do more than like 2 or 3 hours, but that's the idea. And you get a little bit of that wonderful sour complex flavor that's more than just the flour. Plus, this has extra umami thanks to Wade's koji flour, so I'm really enjoying that.
Well done, Wade. And that's a perfect segue. So thank you, Gordon. So next up and last up is Wade. So quick little bio, of course, as usual. So Wade owns and operates a maximum nutrient bioavailability food lab named the Fermented Forest. He specializes in koji fermentation and permaculture, but is fluid with most other types of fermentation as well. And he has 20 years of experience foraging and 10 years working with koji. I'm surprised he hasn't written a book yet. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Wade, but I'm pretty sure you haven't written a book, but we're all waiting for it. So I'm going to be posting inside of the comments. You guys can find him on Instagram as well as his website. So his website is patreon.com/FoxAmongBears, and his Instagram is the same thing, FoxAmongBears. So please check him out. I'm sure he would appreciate some follows. And then, without further ado, I'll pass it on over to Wade.
Thanks, Robert. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I did write a book.
Right.
I didn't realize it was. I thought 1 to 12 size was larger than this. Like 8 of these can fit in my hand. But I make this like micro molasses, like an alcohol-free extraction process, and I didn't put all the necessary things on the label, so it's all in here. And I put like a bunch of scratch and sniff stickers, and the orange ink uses cordyceps in the ink, and I just made it kind of fun. But Anyway, what I worked on tonight was making mushroom misos. Are It's a difficult thing, and I myself haven't had a whole lot of success with them. And so this is kind of a way around that. And um, for this, sorry, meh. Okay, for this, you're going to need like an 8 ounce container of white miso and then some dried morels. And literally, you just put about half an inch of the miso in the bottom of the container and put a layer of morels and then another layer of miso, another layer of morels, and then top it off with another layer of miso, and then you throw it in your fridge for 2 weeks. And the dried morels will absorb all the liquid from the miso, and they'll turn into like this texture. So it's almost like a white soy sauce flavor. And then I take that and some of the miso and mix it in with butter, and then you have a morel miso butter. And then for tonight, just as for example of like how I use this, you can use like Gordon and other people said, like just you can use it however you want, but you have to make sure that it cooks properly, and that's why I like making butter because. But I made a focaccia, and that's some of the miso zuke, like miso pickled morels on top, and then I stuffed it. Like I added the butter, like little dollops of it inside the focaccia, so it's like built-in butter. Um, but yeah, it's just again just kind of an easy way to preserve your morels, and then you can also freeze the butter for when you want to use it, and um, because it's nice to have dried morels, but I also like if I can have them fully preserved doing something that's not just sitting in a jar. That's also kind of cool. But yeah, someone asked if you can use any miso. Yes. The reason I use white miso is that it's kind of like using um, white balsamic instead of uh, apple cider. One of them allows the process to happen without taking a whole bunch of the actual flavor away from the original ingredient. And so I like using an immature miso so that it is kind of the preservation medium. It has enough flavor and umami, but it's not too pungent. For when you make a butter out of it, and then um, you can still taste a lot of the morel flavor, and it's not like overpowered by, I say, a red miso or a yellow miso. But yeah, that's all I got. Did I do okay?
Amazing, Wade. Good job. No, it's a perfect condiment. No, honestly, it can be utilized on a whole bunch of things. And honestly, guys, if it comes down to condiments, Wade's your guy. He knows what he's talking about and basically what he does for a living. So, um, if there's anyone that you're going to be learning how to make condiments from, Wade's the guy.
I just did a koji matsutake ketchup. It was like pretty good. Um, gonna make some chips with it because the ketchup chips down here are deplorable. Um,
Are you going to dehydrate the ketchup and turn it into a powder to toss on the chips?
yep.
Okay, smart. I love that. Someone asked, does it matter what type of miso you use? Which got my brain working because I was like, oh my God, like white miso with blonde morels, but what about like a dark miso with like burn morels kind of thing? Because again, different misos tend to be associated with different seasons in Japan. And so you could think about the seasonality and progression of morels as it pertains to what kind of miso you want to use. I think really you could
It's,
probably use anything, but you have thoughts?
something else is like if you want, like I said, as miso ages, tamari is pulled to the top, and so you could technically add a little like soy sauce in this, so it turns into kind of like a morel tamari. There's like a bunch of different things to do. I just did more like I wanted to share kind of the base, the 1.0 version, but like if anyone wants to like learn more about this, I'm happy to share because it's again, it's a really easy, safe way to preserve mushrooms in general. It's not just specific to morel, it's anything.
Yeah. Someone asked two other types of mushrooms, and I was immediately, my brain went to like, well, shiitake and miso is an amazing combo. So if you probably, but shiitake is tough, and if they come whole, you might want to like powder them and then make those layers, or just stir it into the miso. And then because raw shiitake can cause severe dermatitis, you definitely want to put some heat to that miso before you eat it. And same with the morels.
Would Miraculous work?
Maripilus, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. If you took, and again, I would probably powder it rather than leaving it. You wouldn't. The texture of dried stuff like that can be problematic. I think one that might be fun to try would be like dried porcini, because that one is edible raw, so you wouldn't necessarily have to cook it. My favorite thing to do with miso butter is put them like I make a garlic miso butter, and then I put that in oysters, and you grill them, and that's just out of bounds.
Another reason why I use the white miso is that at that stage there's still active enzymes. So as the morels absorb the liquid and become like they reanimate, uh, you have koji contains chitinase and cellulase, so you're kind of like breaking down the mushrooms from the inside out and opening up like the flavor profiles so that like when you do end up cooking it, uh, it just maximizes that flavor potential. So it's like safely breaking them down over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made the suggestion to someone that some people have gastric sensitivity to morels for whatever reason, and I think it's entirely possible that after soaking them in miso and having those extra enzymatic breakdown products, that you might be able to handle eating morels after that kind of treatment. So it's another thing you guys could think about. If there's a mushroom that's giving you trouble in the past, you could try treating it with koji or miso and seeing if that, again, limited amounts, don't overshoot, but it might help.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool.
Lovely. Always like it spurred conversation.
Spike, I got a question for you. So all those different morphology representations, is that all Stropharia, like the wine cap, or is it different Stropharia species or varieties, or do you have any thoughts on that?
They're all the same. I've had a few genetically tested. They all came back the same. I know they use what is it, Forma lutea for the yellow ones because they're actually the most common. But I've seen all these colors in the same patches. They can grow right side by side. The white ones are always really tricky. Usually the sun has something to do with that, but people are always shocked. I'm like, well, that's a wine cap. It's like, there's no way that's a wine cap. But by far, the yellows are my favorite, and I have actually saved spores, sent it off to cultivators that have had good luck, and that yellow gene on the pigmentation transfers. So as for why they do that, I'm not sure. There are different variations, there are different forms, but they're really all the same thing.
Interesting. I have a question for you, because I've grown wine caps many times and had lots and lots of them. Before the caps open up, I don't hate the flavor. It's a little bit kind of in between like a potato and an artichoke, and it cooks up well and it's nice. But once the caps open, everything gets this just dirty Stropharia flavor that reminds me of the smell of the mycelium, and like the smell of wine caps just permeates the house, permeates my skin, and it grosses me out. And the only way I've really been able to deal with it is to like turn it into a duxelle and just load it up with like miso and sake and sugar and just try to like make it not taste like itself. Do you have a suggestion on how to like de-winify or de-stropharify that flavor that's to me so intense?
So for me, I find the flavor is more intensified in the buttons. It's more concentrated. It has this kind of, I don't want to say grassy because that's not really a term we like using in cooking, but it has this grassiness to it. But I would discard once the gills start turning, like a light lilac color, I would still collect. But once they start getting dark coloration, you just really skip over them. And if you're familiar with wine caps, there's usually plenty around where you can skip over those ones. Those are the ones I take and I collect. And every time I'm driving by like a wood chip patch somewhere, I'll just throw them out the window. And that's how I started my beds at my house. All the scraps, all the trims, all the stems. You just throw it in the wood chips, and within a couple of years, they're there.
They're amazing mushrooms.
I will jump in here to say that if there's any questions from anyone, there is a Q&A function down below, or you can write it into the chat. Or if you're feeling brave, we can you can turn on your mic and or your video if it's possible, and you can ask the question directly to us. Whatever works. Right now, we have no questions in the queue, so it's up to you guys if you want to jump in and ask some questions. Otherwise, we'll keep rambling on. But I will say, before our panelists eagerly jump in, is that I did post a whole bunch of links. These are basically the key links into the chat. So just kind of a little catch up on all the links that I've posted throughout this chat. So feel free to go and click on any of those if you feel the desire to do so. Okay, back to you guys.
Real quick to answer Gordon, William sent me a bunch of like freeze-dried matsutake, and they had this kind of like plasticky flavor. It's like some sort of like not mushroomy flavor. And I used basically an enzyme wash where you're just using koji flour and water. But I'll soak them in that, and that will kind of leach. It has tanninaise in it too, so that can like leach a lot of that negative flavor profile out. And then I just kind of like lightly squeeze the liquid out of it, and then I toss the water and then do a new one. And by that time, it just kind of leaches. It's a way to like leach that out and break it down. But that's the only thing I can think of that, because it got that awful flavor out of the matsutake. So if it could do that, I imagine it would totally do what you're wanting to with the shifaria.
Maybe. Cliff had asked in the comments, do you ferment mushrooms? And there's a couple things that immediately sprung to my mind, which is I've done like lacto fermented mushrooms where you make like a 2.5, 3% salt brine, and you can stick the mushrooms right in that. I did that with chanterelles last summer after seeing my friend Gabrielle do it. And then she was using that liquid from the lacto fermented chanterelles to mix with cream to then make her own like lacto fermented chanterelle butter, which was one of the best things I'd ever had on fresh bread. Generally, if you want to lacto ferment mushrooms, I think it's better to kind of blanch them first and then try to lacto ferment them by throwing in a piece of garlic or a pepper to get the lactic acid bacteria. And then separately, you can do fermentations like Wade does with koji or Aspergillus oryzae, and you can just straight up try to break them down, or you can even do something like a garum, which is kind of like a fish sauce kind of thing, where you like mix a bunch of probably shio koji and salt with mushrooms, and then pack them in a jar, and then put like a layer of salt on top, and you basically just let it decompose until it turns into like a salty, hella salty liquid fish sauce kind of thing, and then decant that off. So those are ways you could ferment mushrooms, but I'm sure Wade and Spike have other ideas that you might be able to ferment mushrooms with.
Wade's our fermentation guy. Wade?
I made a cordyceps gastrique. Like I made a cordyceps vinegar, and that took a little while to figure out. I'm not exactly sure why the last batch worked. I'm just happy that it did. So fermentation is it's one of those, like, you could have the perfect ratios and it not turn out how you expect it to. So it's kind of those, like most of my job is failure, which, I mean, that's like where the learning is. So it's, I'm happy. I'm happy for success for obvious reasons, but I'm also happy if things don't turn out because I figure out why, and that kind of gives me more perspective as a whole. But yeah, like the lacto, I like to make basically like with chanterelles, for example. I like to pick them when they're like right after a rain, like so they're super wet. So I'll slice them and then salt, like 2 to 3% salt with like coarse salt, so it striates it. I'm wanting as much liquid out of them as possible, and put it in the fridge for a day, and then I strain off the extracted liquid, and I cook that back down into salt, and they pull a lot of sugars out of the chanterelles, so that caramelizes into the salt. It's kind of like, and there's no physical chanterelle, so it's like an essence of chanterelle salt, but it's like nooch flavor and roasted carrot and butterscotch. I mean, it's just wild how much flavor profile it pulls out. And then I'll take the salt brine chanterelles and boil them in white balsamic and then strain that, and now you have a chanterelle vinegar or chanterelle infused vinegar. And then I'll pack the mushrooms in a jar and cover them with oil, and they'll stay like fine on the counter for it's not fermentation, it's preservation, but the start of it is a lacto ferment. I never really considered it to be that. I was just salt curing. But I'm trying to think of what I've done. You can put the fresh mushrooms in honey and add koji, and that's a way to like kind of force the vinegar because it'll go to like a mead, and if you drink, that's probably great. But after that, you can force it to chanterelle, or you can use that as like the June for like the honey based kombucha. I mean, there's a bunch of different directions you can go, but it's just kind of like there's definitely a baseline of information that's necessary. Um, but uh, but maybe that'll be Gordon's next book.
Him too. Well, let me switch over here and give something to Spike to respond to. So we got a question from Brooke here, actually.
On fermentation.
It's not on fermentation. You're lucky.
Every time somebody asks, I always defer to Wade because I know that's his specialty there. But I'm more classically trained. I pickle, I cure, I brine. You know, I don't really ferment too many things.
My question's not fermentation, so you're safe.
Okay.
All right. So the question from Brooke is, how do you prepare your Ganoderma? It's okay. So Brooke says that for him, he mandolins them, tosses them with some sesame oil, and flash fries them with some rosemary salt, which sounds delightful. But what do you do?
What do I do with my Ganoderma?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I really like to treat them like puffballs because they're really like these giant puffballs that grow on the side of these hemlock trees. And if you've ever experienced them, you know that once they start developing that kind of red ring, they start getting bitter. You know, especially when they get fully matured. But they have this really nice. It's much firmer than a puffball, and it does have this distinct flavor. A little bit of that pininess to it, but it's very pleasant on it. But when I cook them, I do like to just pair them with something. So usually it's just like sauteed, as you might do sauteed mushrooms in an omelet or for a steak or things like that. You know, you can, once you start adding too many flavors to it, you really pull away from that natural flavor that they have, which is it's a really nice treat if you've never tasted them before, because they're such a fantastic meaty mushroom that actually has flavor. You know, when I compare them to puffballs, a lot of times puffballs don't taste like much. You know, it's just body. They're very airy. So yeah, that would be it. I know in my little presentation, you know, the last time I had a good batch, I just sauteed in garlic butter and paired them with meat.
I mean, it seems almost that the common denominator across most mushrooms is get them when they're young. You know, most of them, right, as they age. I mean, not to mention you'll be probably battling bugs and all that stuff, but you know, so many mushrooms actually end up becoming bitter as they age, or just, you know, developing some unpleasant aroma or taste of some sort. It's not true across the board, but it's a
there's only one mushroom, and it's not a spring mushroom, so I didn't include it. There's one mushroom that I will actually wait and let it grow, and those are the calostoma that we have up here. Because, you know, when you get them when they're young, all you have is the cap of the puffball, and there's no stalk. And the stalk is what I seek after, and those take months. You know, they might grow 2 inches, 3 inches, and, you know, over a whole season before you really want to collect them. So that's really the only mushroom that I don't recommend people get in the button stage.
I will say that big bug infested boletes tend to make the best porcini powder, but I'd rather eat them when they're young.
Is that just because of the extra protein?
I mean, it literally, when there's bugs in them, yeah, I mean, possibly, or maybe there's defense chemicals produced by the mushroom. It just tastes, there's more umami, and yeah, maybe you're grinding up some bugs too. Why not?
We all need a little bit of extra protein, right? Little bugs never hurt anyone. Come on, people. Let's not get too squirmy here. We do forage wild mushrooms. At one point in I believe it was Kristen's video. She had said that for her, she always just kind of quickly does a clean of the mushrooms, a brushing, and then dehydrates them, and then afterwards will basically make sure that they're clean when she reconstitutes them. Whereas I believe it was Gordon had said he does it the other way around. So this is definitely an opinion, I suppose, things. And I'm just curious, Wade, Spike, what would you guys do? Do you guys wash them and then dehydrate them, or do you dehydrate them and then wash them? And then a question for all three of you would be: is there a specific reason why? Do you find that there is a difference in how you do that?
I'll start it off. So I will have it as clean as possible at the beginning stage, and then cross check to the second stage and cross check. I will always start them off clean, 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 clean. And this goes back years ago when I was talking to the owner of the restaurant when he permitted me to sell all these mushrooms at the restaurant, and I made a dish just for him to try. And it had a little bit of grit in it, because it wasn't clean, 100% thoroughly. And I'm just like, well, us people that eat mushrooms, we're kind of used to, we don't mind, a few maggots that end up in there. You're not going to notice them. It's expected to get a little hemlock needle or something. And he said, absolutely not for my customers, is what he said. So me being in the commercial restaurant industry, that is the approach that I have to take, is that the average person that wants to try a mushroom for the first time, they're not going to really want to,
Consume
accept that little bit of stuff that we will actually eat at home because it saves us a little time and really doesn't bother us. So that's just the professional chef in me, is that, has to be clean from start to finish.
Makes sense. What about you guys?
So also from the chef standpoint, like as a younger chef having to clean dirty chanterelles, and then as like a forager, I'm not gonna push that. It's like in a kitchen, the worst thing you can do is create more work up the chain. So like even though I'm a forager, I'm not in someone's kitchen. I'm still keeping that in mind, and like I pick clean mushrooms because putting a dirty mushroom in with a bunch of like I'm just if I don't pick them clean, I have to clean them prior to taking them to the chef. And I'd rather not touch them. I'd rather not bruise them. I mean, it's like the principle of it. Like I'm not trying to just sell massive volume for less. Like I don't know. It's the principle of it. I'd rather keep them clean, but because I've had to clean some filthy ones, and now it's just like never again, never again. Awful.
It can be a little painful, especially like lobster mushrooms or something, where they just
Ugh.
have a great capacity to wrap around every bit of dirt that they find.
In the areas that I would like, this is South Carolina and Georgia, so it was like sandy soil. Like getting sand in any like it's inside it. So it's just as a forager, my common courtesy was to um pick them as clean as possible, and I had no lack of chefs willing to buy them because they didn't have to then expend extra. Like the price of them was the actual price, and well then now we have to pay somebody else to like clean them and add that to the total fee. But yeah.
Yeah, let's say that, from my end, I always wash them before I dehydrate them. That way, kind of to your point, Taylor, kind of the point of everyone here, when I reconstitute them later, I want to be cooking. That's probably what I'm doing, right? I'm reconstituting. So I don't want to be thinking about cleaning. I want my food to already be clean and ready to be utilized in cooking. And, obviously if I'm reconstituting, the liquid that comes from reconstituting can be, a powerhouse of flavor as well. And I could strain it and all that stuff at the time being, but again, I don't want to be doing that at that time. I want to just be, reconstituting. And if I want to use that liquid, I'll use that liquid. And, it should be more or less clean. I might still strain it a bit from, if there's anything left over, but for the most part, I find it better to just wash them and then dehydrate them.
And to add on to that, Robert, is that at work, in my kitchen, when I am working with dirty mushrooms and clean mushrooms, I do label them as such. I do label them if they're clean mushrooms that I work with that is getting saved, or if they're dirty mushrooms that get saved, because I find, the mushrooms that I bring in wildly and I clean or one of my staff cleans is always 10 times better than the cultivated farm ones that I buy that have to get all that substrate and barley and whatever they use. And also I find with a lot of imported mushrooms, dried mushrooms like porcini and other mushrooms, is that it's not uncommon to have a lot of grit and pine needles and things that end up in there. So yeah, especially I use so much porcini at work. I get pounds and pounds imported from Italy that are dried, and I need to label them for my staff to know when I'm working with them, is that, oh yeah, these ones are still dirty. You need to take a look before you put them in something, or hey, I already took care of that. I'm going to label this clean.
Yeah, I do the same thing because sometimes I don't have time to clean them before they go in a dehydrator. So if that's the case, then I do not want to mix them with all my actually clean mushrooms. So definitely marked.
You can, I was gonna say, you can be, because I've come home and been so overwhelmed and tired and all the other things that, like, a real true cleaning is not gonna happen. But if you can just dump them quickly in a bucket of water, or like just sort of wash them a little bit in a bucket and then put them over, it's still, anything you can do is gonna make it better later. And like you said, when you want to reuse that rehydration liquid, if there's actual dirt in there, it's gonna taste like dirt. If you get most of that off, but again, for like commercial mushrooms that come in pretty clean, you don't necessarily need to soak them in the same way that you would for a highly textural mushroom like a morel or a black trumpet. And then stuff like chanterelles, I don't dry those, but I do soak them or wash them very thoroughly, and then I'll put them out and point a fan at them, so they get the surface dried out, and then you're able to put them in a bag and keep them in the fridge for a few weeks. And I do find that doing that cleaning step does help your mushrooms last longer than if you keep them dirty.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I don't have any other questions that have come in. So I'll give people 20 seconds to come up with anything else. Gordon, would you want to say something? Is that what that was? Okay.
I wanted to kick something back to Gordon, just because he mentioned trumpets and cleaning trumpets. Are the black trumpets out west, dirty? Because they are super clean. They are super clean here on the east. That is like the last mushroom I ever consider cleaning, because as long as you got your scissors and you give it a little tap just in case something fell in the vase, I mean, you can get pounds in a basket that are all clean and ready to go right from the woods. And just from a flavor profile, I do believe that we have superior taste on our black trumpets, at least in New England. I'm not sure about the whole East Coast, but the ones on the West Coast, since you mention it, they do have this kind of earthy, dirty kind of flavor to them. At least the ones that I got shipped. They look clean. They were relatively clean. But I'm just curious, because I know you hop back between coasts. If the trumpets are really, do they get that dirty and that dusty out there out west?
Well, it really depends on like substrate and habitat, certainly, because whether it's East or West Coast, if the trumpets are growing out of dirt and it rains and dirt splashes up on them, then they're some of the dirtiest mushrooms you can get. And if they happen to be in a nice mossy area and there's no splashback, then they're virtually clean. The issue here is our trumpets are bigger, so there tends to be more stuff, and also the stems tend to be quite a bit longer. So sometimes you can get like fir needles and dirt and stuff like way down in the stem of it. And so for the yellow feet and the black trumpets, I often split them in half before I even go ahead and soak them. And then you might want to even use your finger to kind of like scrape out anything that's in there. I agree with you on the flavor in the sense that the East Coast ones tend to be a little bit fruitier and a little more buttery, but their texture is not quite as substantial, whereas the West Coast ones have a little bit more of a dark, earthy, like truffle-like flavor, but they lack some of that nice cheesiness. And yeah, they're more substantial texturally, although most of the time I end up like blitzing them down into a paste anyhow. So I like them both, but for different reasons.
I agree with you, Mike, that further north from you, our black trumpets are also pretty damn good. Probably one of my favorite mushrooms, honestly. And Ashley says in the comments that the black trumpets in the limestone mountains are sandy as hell. So there you go for that. Okay, no other questions have come in. We are at the 9:30 mark, so we are going to call it a night there. And I'd like to thank once again all of our panelists, Spike, Gordon, Wade, and of course, Kristen for recording the video. Don't forget to buy Gordon's book, don't forget to ask Wade to send you his book. You can put it in a little envelope. Send it. And
One of one.
go visit Spike in his restaurant. You can visit me on thinkfungi.org. I don't really have anything else that you can do for me. So thank you again to all of our attendees, of course, for attending. We do this for you, and we very much appreciate your attendance. And with that, we'll sign off. So thank you, everyone, and have an absolutely phenomenal evening. Here. Bye.
Thank you.
Spike.